Most men don't talk about it. Some don't even have words for it. It doesn't show up as a breakdown. It shows up in the way that he zones out at dinner or tells a joke instead of admitting he's overwhelmed, or he goes quiet when things get too real, right? He says, I'm good, I'm fine, but he's not. And no one asks again. Not necessarily because they don't care, but because they assume he's solid. That assumption is a silent killer. From early on, they're handed an invisible instruction, a set of invisible instructions. They're not printed down anywhere, they're just implied. But every man knows the rules. And those rules are to be strong, to be useful, don't cry, don't ask for help. Just solve it, fix it, and then carry it. That becomes the OS, the operating system, the default programming. And it teaches us how to survive. But it also teaches us how to vanish. Because anything that doesn't look like control gets filtered out as weakness. Even if it's human, even if it is necessary. And then over time, a man forgets what it feels like to be fully human. He just becomes a function, a utility, a role. And it doesn't happen all at once. It starts small. Moments that teach you that your pain makes others uncomfortable. Moments when vulnerability feels like exposure. And through that process, through those experiences, you learn to compartmentalize, to delay, to deflect, to get through. You learn to keep things moving even when you're falling apart. You learn to smile when your chest is full of concrete. And people applaud you for it and call it strength. But it's not strength. It's emotional triage. A man who bleeds in silence isn't stronger. He's just quieter about the damage. And for most men, permission is conditional. You're allowed to be tired if you've worked yourself to death. You're allowed to cry at a funeral. You're allowed to break, but only after you've held everyone else together. And even then, only briefly. You are taught to earn rest, always, to justify emotion, to apologize for being overwhelmed. You spend years being useful to everyone around you until you stop asking if anyone sees you. And that's the part that no one talks about. Most men don't burn out from weakness, they burn out from invisibility. And your template for manhood comes from somewhere. Some had strong fathers, strong, steady fathers to learn from and emulate. Others had absent ones or volatile ones or wounded ones who did the best they could with what they had, but they fell short. They came up short. If your father modeled suppression, that became your compass. If he was unreachable, you learned to never reach. But fatherhood isn't just about a person, it's about pattern. And every man carries a pattern either to replicate it or to repair it. And the hard part is this: you can't pass on what you were never given unless you build it from scratch. There's a moment in most men's lives where the performance starts to collapse. That mask gets heavy. The distance becomes unbearable. And the anger isn't anger anymore, it's fatigue. You start wondering why nothing feels real anymore, why relationships feel so transactional, why people seem close, but you still feel alone in a crowded room. You realize you've spent years being dependable, but not known, and strong, but not safe. And it leaves you with a quiet question. Does anyone actually know me? Or just what I do for them? It's not always tears. Sometimes it's overworking. It's silence. It's checking out of conversations or sleeping too much or not at all. Sometimes it's picking fights that don't matter because you've forgotten what peace feels like. Sometimes it's flatness, just a lack of joy, a sense that the world moved on without you. And that's not a state of failure, that's overload. And no one really teaches men how to name that because we're told to manage emotion, not to feel it, not to process it, just manage it. You're the guy who handles it. You're the one they lean on. And that's part of who you are. You don't resent that. But the truth is, no one checks on the guy who always says he's fine because people just assume that you're built for it. And after enough years of that assumption, you start to believe it too. Until the day something breaks, quietly, invisibly, and everyone says, he never seemed like someone who was struggling. That's the point. He didn't seem like it, but he was, because struggle doesn't always look loud. It's not always obvious. Men don't avoid emotion because they're cold. They avoid it because they've seen it used against them in courtrooms, in arguments, in breakups, in moments where they tried to open up and it got twisted. They learned that speaking made them vulnerable to being dismissed or labeled or penalized. And so they chose silence. Not because they don't care, they do care, but because they've had to protect the part of them that still does care. That part is still alive. It's just underground. Being honest about your struggle isn't weakness. It is integrity. It says, I want to be better than the blueprint I was handed. Not because I hate what made me, but because I've outgrown it. Healing doesn't mean burning the past. It means acknowledging it and learning from it and choosing something different. It means finding strength not in how much you hide, but in how much truth you're willing to carry with you without letting it harden your heart. So here it is. I'm not okay. And I don't say that looking for pity. I say it because silence isn't working for me or for the men watching this who've carried more than anyone knows. It doesn't make me unstable. It makes me human. And that's all I've ever wanted permission to be. If you're listening to this and something in you finally exhaled, you're not the only one, dude. And maybe that's the point. To make space for a different kind of strength, the kind that tells the truth, even when no one expects you to.